is Caitlyn Clark. Now, we talked about her previously. We talked about the Nike contract. We talked about the WNBA. I've got a clip queued up. I'm going to see if I can get this. And I'm sure you heard, did you hear Charles Barkley talking about Caitlyn Clark and referencing LeBron James?
No, I don't know what clip you're talking about.
Let me see. I've got that here. You guys should be able to hear it. I'm just going to play this short clip.
You women out there, oh, petty, man.
Okay. First, as soon as he said, you women out there, you all petty, that just, I think a lot of people turned it off right there, but let's hear the rest of it. I know the volume's really low, but let's give it a shot.
Hey, LeBron, you're 100% right on these girls hating on Caitlyn Clark. Y'all petty girls. I expect men to be petty. We're the most insecure group in the world. Yeah, you are. Y'all should be thanking that girl for getting y'all ass private charters, all the money and visibility she bringing to the WNBA. Don't be petty like dudes. Listen, what she's accomplished, give her flowers. Stop being petty, all you women out there.
All right, we get the idea. Stop being petty.
And I know most likely where you're going to go with this, but go ahead.
No, where do you think I'm going to go? Let's go with it.
I think you're going to go in the route of our physical therapy profession or the therapies in general. The online sentiment around many things, around our industry, around, corporates and mills and hiring and, I don't know, job and career choices and job satisfaction. And I'm assuming you liked the clip so much that you wanted to share it, because maybe, Tony, maybe you believe that a lot of therapists out there have a similar sentiment, and maybe you feel, I don't know, I'm just guessing, maybe you feel like Charles Barkley and wanting to say, hey, therapists, stop being petty. Am I right? Am I wrong? Am I somewhere in the ballpark?
You are dead on, exactly right. That is what makes you such a great therapist, is because you understand human nature. You can read people. You know what people are thinking before they verbalize it. Yeah, like we see it constantly. I'm guilty of it just as much as everybody else. So I don't want anybody to think that I'm above being petty. But we see somebody succeeding, and the first thing we go to is to tear them down. And I'm really impressed that you even mentioned the PT mills, because I agree, like in my mind, they are clearly serving a specific demographic. They are clearly doing a great job in the service they deliver. They're serving the consumer at what the consumer wants, meaning a combination of quality, price, everything coming together. If they weren't doing that, they would not still be in business. So the bottom line is, no matter how much other therapists hate what we're referring to as a mill, those serve a purpose, and they were there for a reason. Now, yeah, I agree. I think we're all subject to being petty. We see somebody succeed, we want to pull them down. I'm just blown away by the fact that now we see this. We see clips of other players, cheap shotting Caitlyn Clark. There's all this buzz around it. And again, it's totally true. Like, she has brought notoriety. She's brought money. She's brought fame to the league, not even just her, but other players that haven't been able to achieve that kind of, result. They can't stand it. It's burning them. They're getting so mad about it.
It is what it is. And any popular person, like let's say, for example, I don't know how many physical therapists know Larry Benz. I mean, he owns or co-owns Confluent and Evidence of Motion, and Confluent owns 900, probably close to 1,000 locations, manages or co-owns or owns outright that many locations. So for years, Larry was the president of the private practice section for the APTA. He has done, to his credit, a ton of media. He's been on a ton of podcasts and webinars and town halls, and he's done a ton for the profession. But privately, different colleagues and friends and whatnot will take cheap shots at him, or people like that are in the spotlight, that are on the podium, that are on the stage all the time, that are on the microphone all the time, getting recognition, notoriety, whatever you want to call it, all that. And yeah, I mean, it's easy. It's easy to take shots at someone like that. And then there's a lot of therapists or practice owners that know him and agree with like the things that he's done. I mean, he's written books, he's done a ton of things. But then there's other owners and there's other physical therapists specifically that will take cheap shots at someone like that. And I think it's just easy. It's kind of like people, years ago hating on LeBron James and like, but now he's, I don't know, like second all time or whatever with scoring, or third. I mean, like past Kobe. And, I guess it's easy to take shots and find chinks in someone's armor or something like that. But anyone that's doing anything, right? So even you and I, and you've gotten significantly more online exposure and all that. So I'm like, trying to just keep up and keep my head above water. But with you and I putting stuff out there like this, like there's always going to be someone that like says some issue that we said something wrong. I said something incorrectly, or they didn't like my stance on something or whatever. Anyone who's out there doing something, there's going to be some polarization. There's going to be some people that agree and some people that disagree. That just is what it is, right?
Yeah. And I think it's the greatest sign, obviously, that you're sharing innovative ideas, something, worth discussing, something worth talking about. I shared a whole bunch of posts over the weekend that I want to get into a little bit on today's episode. Going back to Caitlyn for a second, in a previous PT Breakfast Club, you and I had talked about her 2 contracts. And again, there are so many parallels we can pull from this. So I pulled up the numbers on the screen. The WNBA 4-year contract was $338,000. The same person, the same activity, the same everything, also signed a $28 million contract with Nike. Now, I think do you remember, was that 8 years? It was a longer contract, but still a ridiculous tenfold better contract, more money. And one of the things that I messaged you about over the weekend was I was like, let's talk about this because I think it's so interesting, drawing a parallel between what she's going through and what a therapist would go through. She's never going to create a shoe, like literally in the factory. She's not going to sit at a machine and sew a shoe. She's not going to pack a box. She's not going to print a shipping label. She's not going to do anything that puts the shoes physically into this world or in a consumer's hand. Yet she's making hundreds or 1,000 times more than a factory worker in a Nike factory who's actually building and creating the shoe. And so this goes back to the therapist, the therapist who's so frustrated that they're killing themselves. They're working so hard. They come in early. They stay late. They put every moment of their day into providing the best possible patient care experience. And they're making a fraction of the amount of money that somebody else in the organization might be making who's never going to treat a patient. We see this example across multiple professions, multiple industry. And I think if you're that person sitting there frustrated that you're not making enough, you acknowledge it. You're like, all right, I need more to live. I need more to survive. The effort that I'm doing, I don't feel it's a fair exchange value. But then you don't get mad about it. You don't pout about it. You don't try to tear somebody else down. You recognize what they're doing that is higher perceived value. And you say, do I want to do that? A lot of you don't want to do that. A lot of therapists, don't want to be in the spotlight. They don't want to create the media. They don't want to do that stuff. But what else can you do to increase the value, to put the money in the bank account so that you're not stressed out about paying your student debt, about paying your mortgage, about, putting food on the table? Like literally there are therapists who probably are in situations where they're making decisions about, should I buy this or should I buy that, related to food on the table, because they're working as hard as they can and they just can't make ends meet. What are you thinking about that whole dynamic?
I had so my previous boss colleague Ed Mears had a similar story where there were different employees that would come and almost they would say a comment or they would kind of attack him. He worked for he bought and sold practices even before Motion PT Group, and then he had that $250 million exit. So he's done a lot recently. But hold on, I got a plane flying by. I don't know if you can hear that or
no, you're fine. You can keep talking.
So Ed Mearsh had employees when I think he was working for Physiotherapy Associates or NovaCare Select Medical. I think maybe Select Medical because then it was public and the salaries were public, right? So he would have lower ranking team members approach him and say like, hey, I see that your salary, and I don't even know what it was at the time, but I mean, I don't know. It was over 100 grand. It might've been 250 grand. I don't even know what it was. But he would have lower ranking employees say like, almost like, hey, I saw in the financials of the, you know, the investor packet or the, you know, the publicly available information that your salary is whatever. And, you know, you're never here or you're not in this office. Like, what do you do? Or like, you know, I only make this. And it goes back to it doesn't mean that you, the individual if you're on the lower ranking side, it does not mean that you are not providing value. You're doing something for that job description. But someone that's like a senior vice president or in the C-suite or whatever, they're providing a different amount of value or a different value or a different value driver. And even if they're not treating patients and they're not actually producing revenue for the company, they're doing different things that you may not even realize, whether it's they're raising money, they're working on, you know, ethical, legal compliance so that, you know, it doesn't turn into Health South or whatever. Like there's a lot of things behind the scenes. And going back to the attacking, you know, and try not to be petty or attacking a team member or a colleague or whatever, you want to fully understand where they're at and the value drivers of someone who's in senior vice president or C-suite can potentially move the needle in a bigger way in a short amount of time. And that's why they typically will get paid more. They have a potentially mission critical job responsibilities compared to a physical therapist who maybe is going to make 90 or 100K or something. And they're generating $230,000 in revenue or $250,000 in revenue. So, yeah.
Well, just real quick, looks like Scott's here from Health Motion. Scott, thank you for joining us again. So taking this Caitlyn Clark example, and let's try to tease out some of this. She's getting 28 million from Nike. She's, you know, probably the easiest 28 million she's ever going to make in her life. She's getting, you know, 300 whatever thousand from the WNBA. She's getting elbows in the face. She's getting hip checked to the ground. Like she's getting beat up every single game, working as hard as she possibly can. How do you, I've got my ideas, but how do you look at that comparison to say, why is she getting so much more from Nike for doing so much less than she is in the league?
Well, I don't know. There's a couple ways to go through this, but with Nike will have some projected return on investment, right? They have to do some projections based off the individual, first of all. So they've done a ton of research. They've probably looked at, you know, I don't know, biometric or psychosocial, whatever graphics. And someone like LeBron or someone like Caitlyn Clark, as long as they stay out of trouble, then Nike should significantly have, I don't know what percentage of return on investment, but Nike will over time sell shoes, merchandise, clothing. I don't know if they go into anything else, media rights, or I don't know, autograph signings or anything like that. But like, you know, they're selling merchandise. They're able to use the image and likeliness of Caitlyn Clark for advertisements, for banners, for things like that. And because the athlete, the LeBron James, or in this case, the Caitlyn Clark of the world, because of their style of play, their reputation, their skill level, how they're perceived by the public, that is where Nike probably makes some projections and say, so what was the dollar amount? 28 million from Nike?
Yeah, 28 million versus 338,000 or something.
Okay, so Nike will. I mean, they've been doing this even since before they signed Michael Jordan, or maybe Michael Jordan, I think, was the biggest when they used to have a budget for multiple athletes and they just spent it all on Michael Jordan, and that's how they landed Michael Jordan. So with Caitlyn Clark, they have to make some projections. Nike is a very large, savvy, multi-billion-dollar company. They make projections, and I don't know, it might be 3 or 4x, or it might be above 5x in terms of their return on investment for that $28 million. If I hire a physical therapist and I'm going to pay them, let's just say, easy numbers, let's just say $100,000, and they're going to generate $250,000. So they're generating more revenue than what I pay them. So that's how a business will pay out for whether it's hiring a physical therapist or it's Nike paying Caitlyn Clark some gigantic salary or whatever this contract is. So Nike looks at it as here's the investment, because if Nike doesn't pay $28 million, Under Armour or Adidas or whatever, she's probably had multiple bids from her agent, from Reebok and Adidas and Converse or whatever, all these other companies. So that's maybe the going rate, and Nike, I'm assuming, I'm sure, will have some number that they believe, that contract will be worth $100 million or $128 million to Nike. And so if Nike can make an extra $50 to $100 million in that time span with her name and, shoes, clothes, t-shirts, whatever, with her name, and they're going to probably create a logo. That's another thing. Nike created a logo for Air Jordan. Nike created a logo for Kevin Durant. They're probably going to create some CC or whatever Clark, Caitlyn Clark logo for Nike. And Nike will probably retain that logo over time. And even if Caitlyn Clark gets a piece of the logo or any merchandise with the logo, Nike still gets upside. So that's how they make sense of it. We talked about this before, where the WNBA is a smaller, newer organization. There's just not a lot of ticket sales, merchandise, TV rights, contracts, all of that. And so therefore the total, and it's not, I don't think it's a fair comparison, because we mentioned NFL, NBA, all these others have been around for 60 to 100 something years, all the established top 4 sports. And so the WNBA is newer. And so therefore they just don't have the dollars flowing in and out of the whole organization. That's why her contract is $300,000 for WNBA. Nike's been around since what? The 70s or something. It used to be Blue Ribbon Sports in the, 50s or 60s or 70s. And then it became Nike. So, and Nike's multi-billion-dollar company, and they already have this professional athlete contract. They have it all teased out. They have it all figured out. And so that's the biggest difference. It is, I think, worthwhile, but sometimes challenging for you and I, Tony, to cross the chasm and make a physical therapy comparison, because there's no big company, corporate or whatever, that's multi-billion dollars that's going to pay a physical therapist the Nike side of the contract, unless maybe you're Jimmy McKay, who's listening live, and he would be the type. And Jimmy says longer lever arms equals longer value, #physics. There are maybe some people like Jimmy McKay in the physical therapy world, or others that are producing content that then could potentially have the Caitlyn Clark side of the Nike deal with some physical therapy or healthcare corporate. But there's less of the Jimmy McKays of the healthcare world compared to the Caitlyn Clarks of the basketball world.
Yeah, you nailed it. Jimmy nailed it. When I run some quick numbers and do a little search, like Nike's market cap is 142 billion. The estimated market cap for the WNBA is 2.7 billion. I mean, such a tiny fraction of a percent. They don't have the resources. They don't have the budget. And they would never get the same return. They don't have the product. They don't have the reach that Nike does. And like you said, when you look at the franchise built around Air Jordans and what Michael Jordan did with the sneaker, there's nothing like that in the female market. So my kids, my wife, like, we're into sports, we're into basketball. I look across the landscape of girls basketball. this is probably the most exciting time that there's ever been for little girls to look at the WNBA and have higher aspirations to something like that. And there's no single shoe on the market that really is going to do what this can do for Nike. So there's huge opportunity, long lever, just like Jimmy said. And I think what we see in most PT practices, even at a larger scale, is we don't have that long a lever. Like what's the greatest thing that even the best, most amazing physical therapist is going to do? They can only see so many patients. They only have so many billable units in a day. There's only so much, unless they're going to step out of the patient care role, unless they are willing to be that icon. And I've talked about this before. I think there's a space in the market for a therapist to step out and become a celebrity, to celebritize what we do in therapy. But so many of the best therapists, they don't want to do that. So what happens? You get an average therapist. You get a therapist like me, who I'm not the best therapist. I'm a good enough therapist. And so I'll step out. I'll take a social media platform. I'll put my opinions out there, but I don't necessarily represent the best in terms of patient care. And there's a void, there's a vacuum that needs to be filled out there. And so somebody hopefully watching this is going to step out there and fill it. Jimmy also said, like, look at the Google search data for WNBA over the past 12 months. I'm assuming it's because with Caitlyn's notoriety, that is climbing. So if the WNBA is going to make an investment in the future, like, this is the person. And let's be real, she checks all the boxes. When I listen to some of the clips of some of the other players that were fouling her in recent games, those are not the people that you want representing the organization. They're angry, they're frustrated, they're putting negativity out there, refusing to comment, refusing to answer questions, obviously because they don't want the spotlight on Caitlyn more than it already is. But all they're doing is digging a deeper hole, where she comes out, she rises above all of it. She doesn't say anything negative about anybody. She just says, this is what it is. I'm going to get out there. I'm going to play my best, and I'm going to try to help the team. So like, every single thing that is happening, all the dominoes are falling in her favor. So I think it's such a fascinating story to watch. And I think we can pull a lot of those parallels.